The year is 1787. As we discussed in Part 1, the United States had won its independence, but was already on the verge of falling apart due to the weakness of the Articles of Confederation. The economy was in crisis. Threats outside and inside the new republic were plentiful. Unity was out of sight and the government was deadlocked, with no way to implement the necessary reforms needed to steer the country away from disaster. Many leaders from the Revolution, such as Washington, Hamilton, Madison, and Jefferson, had already sounded the alarms and had advocated for changes in government. James Madison in particular, who served in the Congress of the Confederation from 1780 to 1783, was convinced a better, stronger government was necessary. When serving as a Virginia legislator from 1784 to 1786, he worked towards that goal. First, supporting the Mount Vernon meeting in 1785 and then the Annapolis Convention of 1786. He began to study ancient and modern forms of confederacies and republics, along with examining all the faults with the current political system in the United States. When it became clear in the winter of 1786 to 1787 that a convention of the states would meet in May of 87, he went to work to put all of his study and thoughts into a plan for a new frame of government. Madison wrote to George Washington in April of 1787 explaining his ideas and his plan for a new government based on what he saw as the flaws in the Articles of Confederation and the changes needed to give the nation an effective government. This would be the proposal brought forth by Edmund Randolph at the Constitutional Convention, known as the Virginia Plan. On May 29th of 1787, Virginia Governor Edmund Randolph would address the Constitutional Convention and introduce the plan created by Madison. The original goal of the convention was simply to fix the Articles of Confederation, but now a whole plan to create a new government was being laid before them. Randolph, addressing the convention, stated the difficulty of the current crisis and the necessity of preventing the prophecy of America's downfall. He observed, in revising the current federal system, they ought to inquire on the properties that the government needed to possess, the defects of the current confederation, the danger of their present situation, and the solution to their current problems. On the properties that the government needed to possess, it should be able to secure against foreign invasions, prevent conflicts between the states and rebellions within them, to receive the state's blessings to act on situations that they were incapable of handling on their own, to prevent states from ignoring or undermining national laws and authority. State laws needed to be subordinate to federal laws. Speaking to the deficiencies of the Articles of Confederation, he made known his respect for its authors, and that they had done the best that could be done at the time of its creation. The issues of the economic crisis, rebellion, debt, monetary crisis, and all other present problems had not happened yet, and were not considered at the time of its creation. He proceeded to list the defects of the Articles. It could not secure against foreign invasions. It could not prevent conflicts between the states or rebellions within them, that it could not create national trade policy to protect and benefit the whole nation. It could not prevent the states from ignoring or undermining national laws and authority, and that state laws and constitutions were not subordinate to it. After reiterating the dangers of the current situation, that the nation might fall into anarchy and ruin, and proceeded to offer a solution: the creation of a government based on the principles of a republic. His solutions were as followed: to revise the Articles of Confederation to achieve the objectives of common defense, security of liberty, and the general welfare. The representation in the national legislature should be based on population or wealth of the state. That the national legislature should have two branches or houses. That the first branch ought to be elected by the people of the states and be compensated for their services, and not to serve in any other offices, state or federal, during their term, unless belonging to their branch of government. They should be subject to be recalled and left open a number of specifics such as how often they'd be elected, how long their elected term would be, the age needed to be eligible, how long before they could serve in another office again, and whether they would be eligible for re-election after their term or for how many years they must wait before being re-elected. The second branch was to be elected by those of the first out of a proper number of persons nominated by the state legislators. They may be compensated for their services, hold their offices for a sufficient time to ensure their independency, be ineligible for other offices except for those in their branch during their time of service, and whether they would be allowed to run again and for how many years they could serve. The national legislature should have the power to legislate in all cases too large for the individual states or in cases that affect the harmony of the whole nation. The right of the national government to veto all laws passed by the states. Power to use coercion and force against the states failing to fulfill their duties as established by the Constitution. It proposed the creation of a national executive that would be chosen by the national legislature for a certain number of years and to be compensated for their work. Have all of the executive powers previously vested in Congress and enforce national laws and be ineligible for a second term. The creation of a council of revision composed of the executive and a convenient number of the national judiciary with the power to examine every act of the national legislature, including the veto of laws passed by state legislators before being finalized, and had the power to reject any law or veto by the national legislature unless an established majority of them voted to override the council. Established the creation of a national court system with one or more Supreme Courts and a number of inferior courts, and the inferior courts are to hear cases in the first instance and the Supreme Court as the last resort. Establish a process to admit new states, either from parts of the states or from territories in the U.S. Resolve to ensure a republican form of government and maintain the territory of each state. Resolve to have provisions for the transition of the old government to the new one. Establish a provision for the process to amend the new Constitution whenever necessary without the national legislature. Resolve to have the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of the states be bound by oath to support the new Constitution. Establish that this be submitted to an assembly or assemblies of representatives recommended by state legislators to be chosen by the people to ratify these changes. Edmund Randolph finished his proposals with a plea to not let this opportunity to ensure peace, harmony, happiness, and liberty in the nation escape them. Next time we meet, I'll be going over some of the early debates that arose days after these proposals were given. If you haven't seen the first part, go check out The Complicated Birth of a Nation over on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Please don't forget to like and share the video. Tell me your thoughts in the comments and give me a follow to see more. I'm the Holler Scholar. God bless. Stay vigilant.